everybody, and welcome to From the Ground Up. I'm Karol Weyman, your host today, and I from Outdoor Coffee Shop, and I'm sitting down with John Kenney from Cotney Consulting Group. We are breaking down one of the most expensive and stressful realities contractors face today: construction claims and disputes. Before we get started, I'd love John, who is an influencer on all of our coffee shop sites, to introduce yourself to those who don't know you yet. And again, thanks for being here.
Sure, Carol. Thanks for having me once again. So my name is John Kenney. I'm CEO of Cotney Consulting Group. I worked in the construction industry as a contractor for over 45 years before I went out and started Cotney Consulting Group. And now what I currently do is work on training and consulting issues right within the construction industry. I stay right at home base and work with the people in there. And I'm really excited about today's topics that we're going to be going through.
Yes, and I'm excited as well. And I'm excited that you are an expert in this field and can answer some of these for people that are really in need. So what are the most common construction disputes that you're seeing right now in outdoor construction?
Yeah, so I mean, they actually go through all of construction. It's kind of funny when you think about it. No specific trade is really exempt from any of these things we're going to talk about. But what I'm seeing right now isn't one type of dispute. I'm seeing a lot of pattern to it. So what I usually find it starts with is scope. Something wasn't clearly defined or something changed and no one documented it properly. So documentation is so important and clarity. So from there, what I'm finding out, it turns into payment disputes, change order disagreements, scheduling delays, and finally finger pointing between multiple trades on a project or between an owner's rep or an owner and a trade that you'd find out on the outdoor world as well. So honestly, most of these are not legal problems at the start. They're communication and documentation issues that turn into legal problems. So in the outdoor space, especially like landscaping, hardscaping, pool, etc., you've got a multiple of trades overlapping, fast-moving projects, and a lot of assumptions. And when you have a lot of assumptions, that's where the disputes actually start to grow.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, there's so many different types of construction happening even in the outdoor space or in any space that it really, there certainly can be some butting heads or differences of opinion or what they think the scope is about, et cetera. How should contractors decide when to fight a claim and when it makes more sense to settle?
Boy, that's a great question. So the first thing I love to tell contractors is keep emotion out of your decision, because emotion's going to get you into trouble. And what you can't decide based on being right. So you have to decide based on business impact. Sometimes we can be right and it costs us way too much and we can lose the fight. So what I always tell contractors to look at three things: cost of the fight, time it'll take, and probability of recovery. So again, the cost of the fight is going to be a lot because you're going to be bringing attorneys in the time. How long are we going to be tied up where we're going to be missing value and other things? And then actually, what is our chances of recovering in a legal action? So the way I look at it is if you're going to spend more money chasing it than you're going to recover, then that's not winning. So even if you're technically right, you're still losing. So what I find is the best contractors step back and have to ask themselves this question: does this move my business forward or just prove a point? So we want to make sure that it's a business decision. And I've had these throughout my career as well. Sometimes it's just better off to get it settled, move on, and be back to fight for another day.
Yeah, so you have to check your pride and your ego before you make any of those decisions for
As
sure.
they say, check them at the door.
Right. Wow. So, what types of documentation actually protect contractors when a dispute arises?
So you got to always remember this one. If you've heard me say it before, and I've heard it from a very smart person, and I'll give him credit on this one, Mr. Trent Cotney, because I know he's also involved in with you guys. His best paper will always win. So that's where I come in, is help you get that best paper. So good documentation. Don't look at it as just having a bunch of paper. It needs to tell the story of the job clearly and consistently, not just a bunch of paper. So the strongest contractors' documents are having daily reports. You want to definitely have before photos, during and after, so you can tell that story. Always have written change orders. There's no such thing as verbal. If you can't prove it, it can't be done. So you got to have the documentation. You want to have today's world emails confirming decisions. I kind of stress away from documentation being text because text can be easily deleted, harder to recovery. So I always like to follow up with everything in an email. Have your delivery logs and also track your delays, right? Have those things. And they're not as hard as they sound. And this is the big one that we forget about, weather impacts. Track your weather impacts as they happen. Don't wait till the end and say, hey, I was delayed 5 days by weather, so I have 5 days left on the job to the extension because of that. You're not going to get it. So if I have a weather delay on Wednesday of this week, then on Wednesday, I'm going to note that weather delay and what it caused on the job site. Get it out of the way and document it. But I want to talk about what's a key here. So, right, it has to be in real time. Just like everything has to be in real time, not just the weather impacts. So documentation done after the fact is going to look like it was created to help you win the claim. So I know we're all busy, and especially a lot of our contractors that are listening to this, I know are smaller, they're entrepreneur based, they're actually getting the client, they're bidding on the client, and they're actually overseeing the work. But you've got to put a system in place. People will win if it's documented on a daily basis, but not going back after the fact.
Yeah, and I think that the client learns from what the contractor is really willing to do as well. So if you're setting up the boundaries and you're setting up the protocol and you're setting, how things are going to be, there's going to be a respect there too. I think that's,
Yep.
being prepared. I think that there's an automatic, they're not going to try to get away with as much too. So I think that's important when you have the proper documentation.
Exactly. And let's face it, in today's age for a contractor with the different softwares that are out there that can work easily for almost any business, documentation is not such a cumbersome item as it used to be.
That's true. Very true. So where do you most often see contractors falling short in their documentation practices?
Well, the big one is they wait too long, just as we talked about a little bit before. So everything gets documented after there's a problem. Or worse, it lives in someone's phone, someone's memory. Like I said, scattered text, those are dangerous. So the biggest breakdowns that I see is not having daily reporting, not having written confirmation of verbal changes. Look, I live in the real world. Verbal changes are going to happen all the time on a job, but you have to redocument them back in writing immediately. And then no time tracked for disruptions or delays. Like we know what it was. Oh, wait a minute. So and such contractor or the owner's decision held up with the color. The color created another 2 week delay. Well, that should be documented right away, not after the fact when it doesn't show up. And not having an organized, and I know we've talked about this in some other ones, you got to have an organized system. So if you put a simple checklist together of exactly how your documentation flow is going to go, it's going to be so much easier on you to make sure at the end of the day you followed it. And the magic to this, and this is magic, it goes back to best paper wins. And even though today it's digital, but it's still paper in that sense. When a dispute hits, you're not sitting there trying to build the story. You're sitting there showing the story. That gives you full credibility.
Oh, absolutely. So, I mean, a lot of times it's going to go to a mediation or a negotiation of some sort. And so, how do experts build and present a strong claim that holds up in those situations?
So a strong claim is pretty simple, clear, and it's supported, right? We don't have to have endless novels on what's going on. You got to answer three questions. What changed? How did it impact your work? And what did it cost? And if you got the documentation behind that, that's exactly what they're going to look for. And as I said before, if you're prepared and the other side is not prepared, which I guarantee you they won't be, they're going to be trying to come up with, well, no, it's not exactly like that. It's like this. But if I've already got it laid out, it's time stamped to the time it happened. I'm going to be in a much more credible position. So where I see contractors lose is when they get emotional and they're vague in their notes. You got to still take emotion out of this. So again, like I said, the strongest claims, you got to be timeline based, support it with your documentation, and clearly tied to contract language. That's the key. Make sure that, give you a great example. If I sign a simple proposal and it's mine, I want to make sure that I follow my own contract language because that's going to be in my terms and conditions. If I'm signing someone else's proposal, if it's got certain stages in there, like let's just say for changes, for notices, that's if you find an issue, it has to be notified the owner, say 24 to 48 hours, and then you have X amount of time to price it, X amount of time to dispute it. Make sure you follow that. So again, you still have to understand what your contract is. So the easiest way to think about all this is you're not arguing and don't argue. You want to go in there as a detective. All you are is simply presenting the facts.
Just the facts, man. Just the facts, right? Then
Exactly.
so you gave a hypothetical, but can you give a real world example where a dispute was resolved successfully without going to court?
Sure. So I've worked on projects where both sides were ready to escalate. And what that means is it's going full blown legal. And honestly, we all know if you've ever been full blown legal, and I try to avoid that by all counts because chances are I have very little chance of winning, even if I'm right. It's just something always seems to going in. But once we laid it out, so when I had the problem on this project, I laid out exactly what the timeline was. I had all my documentation and all the actual costs on this project. So the owner caused the delay, but the owner did not want to compensate me for the delay. So it completely changed the tone of the conversation when I went in with my story of facts. So when both parties see the same facts clearly, it becomes less about blame and more about resolution. So I didn't go in there with both guns a-blazing. I'm right, you're wrong. I went in there and say, look, this is exactly what happened in the facts. And actually, the other side sitting in this meeting was like, yeah, it did happen that way, even though I may not have saw it that way, because I was very just straight to the facts. You remember when this happened? Here's what we did. Yes, we had this meeting. I followed up with this documentation. So in many cases, and this isn't just one example, in many projects, when I got to the stage, I was able to set it. I'm sorry, excuse me. I was able to settle it through structured negotiation, and I never even had to get attorneys involved. That's the key. I always want to have negotiation ability to directly get with the owner. And you know what? Sometimes, Carol, I had to be willing to actually spend more than I wanted to correct an issue. But in the long run, I knew if I spent a few $1,000s, let's say on a larger project, that the 2000 wasn't going to put me out of business. I knew for a fact that if I went legal full blown, that 2000 would have easily been 30, 40, $50,000 and I still could have lost. So that's where you save your money. You got to make that business decision.
Oh, absolutely. That's really good advice. What role does mediation play in protecting both relationships and profit margins?
So mediation is very misunderstood. I like to have mediation in there, but there's a couple things, and we'll get to at the end of it. There's binding and non-binding mediation, the same as arbitration and that. But well, what this is what it does allow to do. It allows both sides to go in and be in control. You don't have to have legal costs. You don't even have to have an attorney. You may be of your advantage to each side's going to have an attorney, but you get a chance to talk. You avoid additional main legal costs. It allows you to resolve things a little bit faster. And it also can preserve a relationship because at the end of the day, in mediation, the absolute goal is not for one side really to win. Mediators don't go in with that. They're trying to find that middle common ground that both can say, you know what? Yeah, I'm not 100% right and you're not 100% wrong. Here's what we can do. And you'll find that the temperature comes down in the room. So, because let's face it, at the end of the day in construction and outdoor services, you're going to work with the same people again. All right. So my so-called enemy today in a dispute can be my friend later on, or I can take it to the point where they're going to make sure there's problems there. So mediation does give you the path to solve the problem without burning the bridge. But let's go back to the binding and non-binding. I want everyone to understand this. You need to know that when you go into a project, if there's going to be mediation. If it's non-binding, that means that the decision is not legally final, and either party has a choice to contest the decision. If it's binding, then that's the end of the day. So depending on which side of the decision you're on, that's good or bad either way. But I still think even if it's non-binding, it's worth having it in your contracts to have that opportunity.
Do you think it's better to have it binding then?
Well, I'm not really sure about that because I've had it both ways. if I'm the party that wins, of course I want it to be binding because that's the end of it. But I've also had it where the first decision wasn't in my favor, but we were able to continue a mediation or arbitration process and get a little bit closer. Because again, you want to think about this as real negotiation. And this is an art that's lost in today's world. Negotiation is never about you winning. It's about both sides coming to somewhere in the middle where you can walk away with enough dignity and less amount of cost out of a project and be able to survive to fight another day.
Yeah, that's really well said. So how can contractors protect their cash flow while a claim or dispute is still unresolved?
Yeah, that's a great question there because that's critical. So contractors get hurt not just only by the dispute, but by the cash flow disruption because you're not getting paid. So you want to protect your cash flow by one, billing what is not in dispute. So I want to always make sure that my contract doesn't stop me from collecting money for non-disputed work. There are clauses in there that will say once a dispute is had, you must continue with work, but no monies will be released until the dispute is resolved. Don't get into that situation. It keeps the work moving where possible. You got to continue to get it done, or there'll be other contractual obligations you may be in violation of. Separating disputes from amounts clearly. So if we have a dispute on one section, I want to get with the owner or contractor, whoever it is, and say, yes, let's get this worked out. But in the meantime, we agree on the other 80% of this project. Let's keep going. Let's keep it paid and we'll get this resolved one way or the other. So staying disciplined on your receivables is absolutely important. And then most importantly, don't let one problem project pull down your entire operation. That happens a lot. We're going to spend all our time trying to fix the problem over here, and we've allowed 3 or 4 other problems to happen on other projects because we weren't properly watching over on them as well.
Yeah, you could lose a lot of money if you're not set up in that way. So I think that's really a great points that you're making on that for sure. So what proactive steps can contractors take today to reduce the likelihood of future disputes?
Well, it should actually start, and not to be coy on this one, it should start before the shovel starts the first moving of the dirt, right? You want to start before the job begins. So the strongest contractors out there, you have to have a very defined scope, and it must be clear. So if there's any ambiguity between you and the person you're working for and what you're actually going to be do or what they expect of you to be done, that's key. It goes both ways. That's where the problem's going to originally bubble up. So always have a clear understanding of the scope of your project. You want to set the expectations up front. I find more and more contractors hide behind the fact that the owner wants me to be done in 3 weeks, but it's going to take me 4. I'll do such a great job in 3, they'll forget about the last week. It's not going to happen. So whatever's got to happen on the project, just be honest and open about it right up front. And then always use a written change order process. If someone gives you a verbal, that's fine to get the process started, but you cannot proceed until you get a signature or a written authorization to go forward because you won't get paid. 9 times out of 10, you will not get paid if you don't. You want to then train your field teams on the documentation because as owners, you're not going to be on the job every single time, especially as you grow. As you start to grow, there's going to be more and more letting loose of having the reins on everything. And you want to make sure your field knows. I always look at it this way. It's important to know what to do, but it's even more important for them to know what not to do. Okay, that's what gets you into trouble, the not to do's. And then you got to have consistent and accurate communication at all levels of your company. And then I'd say finally on that, to wrap that part of it up, don't assume any kind of alignment. Always have to confirm it. Most disputes are definitely preventable with better upfront clarity and consistent communication. Most problems can go away when they arise if you get that communication line going between the 2 parties immediately.
Yeah, and I think you make a really good point about making sure you train your staff so that they're all speaking the same language so that they, are not, and that comes with standard operating procedures that, if the owner wants something and there's someone on the site, not the owner, making sure that they know we need a change order. This cannot proceed until that happens. So making
Yep,
sure you have a trained staff, I think is a really critical part of this piece.
absolutely.
Yeah. So for contractors who feel overwhelmed by legal language and processes, what is the first practical move they should make to regain control?
So first and most important, if you're overwhelmed, you're not alone. So don't feel bad about that because this is a crazy field that we're in of that we got to get the job done, we got to find work, we got to do work, we got to get paid, and oh, we have all these legal things we have to follow. Yes, you do. So my advice is really keep it simple. Don't try to fix everything at once because that will really overwhelm you. So start with one thing, standardize your documentation. So what I'd like you to do is create a daily report first. Now, when you create a daily report, I hate the daily reports that have to have 15 pages of information that's not important. What do you really need to cover on a daily report? One, you want to track your weather of the day. Always track your weather. Then you want to track what you went to the job to do that day. How did it go? What did you complete? Were there any issues? And don't forget to track visitors to the site. That's very important to write on there. So and so showed up. I had a conversation. You can get all the information you almost need for this whole process that we just went through on each one of your daily reports. And a lot of times today, they can be done right off of your phone. So you can set up some little software app that will do all this for you on your phone. You want to have a change order form. So again, you want to have it already ready and up front with the full process, how you do it, so you can get your change orders handled immediately. The other thing you want to get is a simple notice process. So if so we'll take this in two steps. I'll go a little bit further on this. If you're contracted with somebody, you must know in their contract what their notice process is, and you must follow it. So you have no way out of that. But what happens with a lot of us in the business? We do our own proposals. We have our own terms and conditions. Somebody signs our proposal, especially if we're doing residential work. Happens a lot. Sign a proposal, we move on. So have a notice process right into at that point. If I find something that changes other than we agree to, I will notify you by end of day if that's the case, within a couple hours. Whatever works for you that you know, the key to this is that you will follow. And then you also want to put in there, I'll get you a price on it. We'll come to an agreement and then we'll move forward. And then, of course, you have to train your team to use it consistently. I can create the greatest, simplest daily report in the world, but if whoever's running my projects don't use it and aren't filling out all the information, they're actually useless. So, as I said, best paper wins. So when your documentation approves, everything else, claims, disputes, cash flow, absolutely get easier to manage. And that's where your control starts. And you start to enjoy what you do rather than dread going out and facing a new customer with new problems every day.
Oh my gosh, such great information. Is there anything else you want to add to, what people should be aware of? I mean, you covered just all the different documentation, the training, when's the best to have mediation, when's the best to, go to court, and take it on. Is there anything else you have advice for our contractors out there?
Yeah, I mean, again, I like to keep it as simple as possible. I guess the whole advice of wrapping everything that we talked about up is try to get rid of head in the sand. Okay, most of us ignore a problem because it's going to be an issue, and we say, "Oh, I'll get to that tomorrow," and then something comes up tomorrow. If you have an issue on your project, the best thing you can do is if you're not the one on the project, you need to get to that project, face it head on, meet with the client, get it right out in the open. Number one, I can tell you from a client's point of view, that usually knocks out 85 to 90% of disputes because they feel like they're part of the solution rather than being the one taken advantage of and just ending up possibly paying another bill. So I think if you do all those things and you do them as quickly up front as you can, I think it's going to make your job and your company run a lot smoother.
Absolutely. Very, very sound advice. I appreciate that. So for our contractors out there that are looking for a little bit more information and a little bit more help, how can they get a hold of you?
Well, you can reach out to me very easily just with my email, and that's jkenney, Kenney, with a J in the front at cotneyconsulting.com, or they can go right over to your website and they can find me on the right on there on the directory. So whatever is easiest for you, reach on out.
Perfect. Yes. Thanks for giving us a plug on our directory. John's all over the place. He's an influencer on all of the coffee shop sites. So he's always giving great information. We really appreciate you being here today. And I want to thank everyone for joining us. And until next time, see you later on From the Ground Up. Thanks. And thanks
My
again,
pleasure.
John.
Thank you.